Stop for a moment, not because something is wrong, but because something extraordinary is moving beneath the surface of your story right now. There is a reason these words found you today. There is a reason your eyes landed here at this exact moment. Last night, while the world was busy with its noise, while countless conversations faded into silence before they could mean anything, one conversation unfolded that carried your energy into a room where your name was never expected to arrive. And what happened next changed more than you realize. Your person sat among friends last night. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The conversation moved from one topic to another. Laughter came and went. Stories were exchanged. Time drifted quietly forward. Yet beneath their calm appearance, something was happening that even they could no longer ignore. Because no matter how hard they tried to focus on other things, their thoughts kept returning to you. Have you ever noticed how some people enter your mind for a moment and disappear just as quickly? Yet others remain no matter how many distractions surround you. That was their experience last night. Your presence followed them into every pause. Into every silence. Into every unfinished sentence. And eventually, one friend noticed. "What's going on with you lately?" A simple question. An ordinary question. But sometimes the smallest questions unlock the biggest truths. For a moment, your person tried to brush it aside. They smiled. They looked away. They attempted to change the subject. Yet something inside them was growing tired of hiding what their heart had already accepted. And then they spoke. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just honestly. The room became quieter than before. Because the words they shared carried a weight that surprised even them. They admitted that someone had been occupying their thoughts more than usual. Someone whose presence felt different. Someone who appeared in unexpected moments. Someone who made ordinary days feel less ordinary. That someone was you. Stay with me here, because this is where the story becomes interesting. What surprised their friends wasn't simply that they were talking about someone. It was the way they talked about you. Their voice changed. Their eyes changed. Even their energy shifted. The people around them noticed immediately. You see, there are feelings people can pretend to have. And then there are feelings that reveal themselves without permission. Last night was one of those moments. Every sentence they spoke carried pieces of a truth they had been trying to understand for a long time. One friend leaned forward. Another stopped scrolling through their phone. Someone else smiled quietly. Because they could all see something your person was only beginning to admit. This wasn't curiosity. This wasn't temporary fascination. This wasn't passing interest. It was something deeper. And for the first time, your person stopped fighting that realization. Now listen carefully. Because the most important part isn't what they said. The most important part is why they finally said it. Something inside them has been changing. Slowly. Quietly. Almost invisibly. Like sunrise appearing before anyone notices the sky becoming brighter. They've reached a point where hiding their feelings requires more energy than acknowledging them. And that shift changes everything. Think about that for a moment. How many life-changing moments begin not with action, but with acceptance? Not when someone moves forward, but when they stop running from what they already know. Last night felt like one of those moments. And what happened after they opened up only made the situation more powerful. Because once the truth enters a conversation, it rarely leaves unchanged. One friend asked another question. Then another. Then another. Each question pulled your person deeper into honesty. And with every answer, they became more certain of what they had been feeling all along. You may not see it yet. You may not hear it yet. But something important is unfolding behind the scenes. The version of your person who constantly avoided their emotions is beginning to disappear. The version willing to face them is beginning to emerge. That transformation doesn't happen overnight. Yet last night became a turning point. A chapter marker. A moment future events may quietly trace themselves back to. But don't rush ahead. Not yet. Because there is something else you need to understand. When your person spoke about you, they weren't describing perfection. They weren't describing fantasy. They weren't speaking about an impossible dream. What moved them most was something much simpler. Something far more powerful. They spoke about how you make them feel when they imagine a future. A future that suddenly seems clearer than before. A future that no longer feels distant. A future that somehow includes your presence in ways they never expected. And that realization startled them. Because sometimes the biggest surprises aren't the people who enter our lives. They're the people who quietly become part of our vision for tomorrow. Last night, your person began recognizing that truth. Not completely. Not all at once. But enough to start changing the direction of their thoughts. Enough to start changing the questions they ask themselves. Enough to start changing what they believe might actually be possible. And here's the part many people overlook. Every meaningful transformation begins long before anyone sees visible results. The seed grows underground before the flower appears above the surface. The decision forms internally before the action arrives externally. The truth becomes real inside the heart before it becomes visible in the world. That is where your person stands right now. In the space between realization and expression. Between understanding and action. Between feeling and revealing. And if you've stayed this far, remember this. The most significant chapters rarely announce themselves when they begin. They arrive quietly. Almost unnoticed. Hidden inside conversations that seem ordinary until you look back and realize they changed everything. Last night may have been one of those conversations. And what was revealed after your person opened up to their friends was only the beginning. Because what happened next carried a message even they weren't prepared to hear. And that is where this story truly starts. A strange thing happens when a hidden truth is finally spoken aloud. It stops belonging only to the person carrying it. And that is exactly what unfolded after your person opened up to their friends last night. The conversation could have ended there. It could have drifted toward another topic. Someone could have changed the subject. Everyone could have laughed, moved on, and forgotten about it. But that is not what happened. Instead, something unexpected took place. The room seemed to lean closer. Not physically. Energetically. As if everyone present sensed there was more beneath the surface than your person had revealed so far. One friend looked directly at them and asked a question they were not prepared for. Do you think this person knows how important they are to you? Silence. Not an uncomfortable silence. A meaningful one. The kind that appears when a question reaches deeper than expected. For several seconds, your person didn't answer. Because the truth was standing right in front of them. And they suddenly realized they didn't know. They didn't know if you understood your impact. They didn't know if you could see what they had been feeling. They didn't know if the connection they sensed existed only inside their own heart or if it was quietly reaching yours as well. And that uncertainty revealed something important. Because people do not spend time wondering these things about someone who means very little. Think about that. People don't imagine future conversations. They don't replay memories. They don't analyze emotions. They don't question possibilities. Not unless someone has become significant. Your person is beginning to recognize just how significant you have become. Stay a little longer. Because another layer of this story is about to unfold. As the conversation continued, one of their friends said something that shifted the atmosphere completely. They said, "Every time you talk about them, your entire face changes." The room laughed softly. But your person didn't. Because deep inside, they knew it was true. There are some truths that arrive disguised as casual observations. Yet those truths often reveal more than direct questions ever could. Your person had spent so much time managing their feelings internally that they never realized how visible those feelings had become externally. Their friends noticed. Their energy noticed. Even their future seems to be noticing. And for the first time, they stopped pretending otherwise. What happened next was subtle. Yet powerful. They began sharing details. Not dramatic details. Not shocking details. The small details. The ones that usually matter most. The way you make them think differently. The way certain memories involving you continue returning unexpectedly. The way your presence feels familiar even when circumstances remain uncertain. The way thoughts of you appear during completely random moments. A quiet drive. A busy afternoon. A late-night reflection. A simple song. A passing memory. You were there. Again. And again. And again. Not because they were forcing those thoughts. Because those thoughts arrived naturally. That realization surprised them. You see, attraction can appear suddenly. Curiosity can appear suddenly. But genuine emotional connection grows differently. It slowly becomes woven into everyday life until one day you realize it is everywhere. That is what your person began admitting last night. And something extraordinary happened when they did. Their friends stopped giving advice. Instead, they started listening. Because sometimes people recognize a real feeling when they hear one. And the more your person spoke, the clearer it became. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't wishful thinking. This was someone finally acknowledging what their heart had been whispering for a very long time. Now pause for a second and consider something. What if this conversation was never only about your person? What if it was also about preparation? Because every meaningful connection reaches a moment where hidden emotions can no longer remain hidden forever. Every story reaches a chapter where silence becomes heavier than honesty. Every path reaches a crossroads where something must evolve. And last night felt like one of those crossroads. The interesting part is that your person didn't walk into that gathering intending to reveal anything. They didn't plan a speech. They didn't rehearse their thoughts. They didn't expect their feelings to become the center of attention. Yet somehow, they left with greater clarity than they arrived with. That matters. More than you realize. Because clarity changes people. Clarity creates movement. Clarity transforms possibilities into intentions. And intentions eventually shape reality. Before we continue, let me share something with you. If these words are resonating with your heart, take a moment to leave a comment about where you're watching from. Share this message with someone who might need encouragement today, and if you enjoy these journeys, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because the next part of this story becomes even more revealing. As the night continued, another friend asked one final question. A question that caused your person to stare into the distance for several seconds before answering. The question was simple. If you had the chance to tell them one thing right now, what would it be? Everything became quiet again. And suddenly, all the jokes disappeared. All the distractions faded. Every conversation before that moment seemed unimportant. Because now they were facing the one truth they had avoided saying out loud. The answer formed slowly. Not rushed. Not forced. Carefully. Like someone holding something precious. And when they finally began speaking, even they seemed surprised by what came out. Because the words weren't just revealing their feelings. The words were revealing who they were becoming. A version of themselves more honest. More aware. More open. More ready. Yet the most powerful sentence of the entire evening was still waiting to be spoken. A sentence that changed the energy of the room completely. A sentence that made every friend exchange knowing looks. A sentence your person never expected to say aloud. And that sentence is where everything begins to shift in a way neither of you could have predicted. The next chapter starts there. There are moments in life when a single sentence reveals more than 100 conversations ever could. Last night became one of those moments. The room was quiet. The laughter had faded. The casual atmosphere that filled the beginning of the gathering had slowly transformed into something deeper. Nobody interrupted. Nobody rushed your person. Everyone simply waited. Because they sensed that whatever was about to be said mattered. And after a long pause, your person finally spoke. Not with certainty. Not with perfect answers. But with honesty. The kind of honesty that arrives when someone becomes tired of hiding from their own heart. They looked down for a moment. Took a breath. And then admitted something they had never fully admitted before. They said that no matter how much time passed, no matter how busy life became, no matter how many distractions entered their world, you always found a way back into their thoughts. The words seemed simple. Yet the effect was powerful. Because everyone in that room understood what those words really meant. Your person wasn't talking about a passing interest. They weren't describing a temporary feeling. They were describing a connection that had quietly remained present through changing seasons of life. And the moment those words left their mouth, something shifted inside them. Almost like a door opening. Almost like a weight becoming lighter. Almost like a truth finally finding permission to exist. Stay with this story. Because what happened next revealed even more. One of their friends smiled and asked, "So what are you afraid of?" The question landed unexpectedly. Your person wasn't expecting it. In fact, they had been so focused on discussing their feelings that they hadn't considered the fears hiding underneath those feelings. For a moment they said nothing. Then they began answering. Slowly. Carefully. Honestly. They admitted they feared being misunderstood. They feared timing. They feared uncertainty. They feared imagining something meaningful only to discover the path wasn't as simple as they hoped. And perhaps most of all, they feared vulnerability. Because opening your heart is never easy. No matter who you are. No matter how confident you appear. No matter how strong you seem. Every meaningful connection requires courage. And last night, your person finally started acknowledging that courage would eventually be necessary. The fascinating part is what happened after they said those things aloud. Instead of warning them. Instead of discouraging them. Instead of focusing on obstacles. Their friends began reflecting something back to them. Something they hadn't fully seen themselves. They pointed out how differently your person talked about you compared to anyone else. The difference wasn't subtle. It was obvious. The way they remembered details. The way they spoke about your character. The way they described moments that seemed small but clearly meant something significant. Everything pointed toward one reality. You mattered. More than they had allowed themselves to admit. And suddenly, a realization appeared. Not like lightning. Not dramatically. More like sunrise. Gradual. Steady. Impossible to stop once it begins. Your person started recognizing that what they felt wasn't growing weaker over time. It was growing stronger. And that realization surprised them. Because many people assume feelings fade when ignored. Yet genuine feelings often do the opposite. They wait. They deepen. They mature. They become clearer. And clarity was arriving last night in ways your person never expected. Now here's something important. The conversation wasn't only changing your person. It was changing the way they viewed the future. Because for the first time, they stopped focusing entirely on uncertainty. And started focusing on possibility. Think about that. How many opportunities remain hidden because people spend too much time studying risks and not enough time imagining outcomes? Last night, your person began imagining outcomes. Positive outcomes. Hopeful outcomes. Future possibilities that once felt distant. And every time those possibilities appeared, somehow your presence remained part of the picture. You were there. Not because someone forced the thought. Not because someone suggested it. Because their heart naturally included you. And that may be one of the biggest revelations of all. Before you continue listening, consider this question. What if certain connections enter our lives not to confuse us, but to awaken us? What if some people arrive not to complicate the future, but to help us see it more clearly? That question lingered in the air long after nobody spoke it aloud. Because everyone could feel the answer forming. As the gathering slowly approached its end, something remarkable happened. The conversation became quieter. More reflective. More thoughtful. And one friend shared a final observation. A simple observation. Yet one that stayed with your person long after the night ended. They said, "Every time you describe your future, they are already part of it." Silence followed. A deep silence. The kind that appears when a truth lands exactly where it needs to. Your person didn't argue. They didn't deny it. They didn't change the subject. Because deep down, they knew. They knew that somewhere along the way, you had become connected to dreams they never spoke aloud. Connected to hopes they rarely shared. Connected to possibilities they were only beginning to understand. And when that realization settled into their heart, everything felt different. The drive home felt different. The night sky felt different. Even their thoughts felt different. Because now they carried something they hadn't carried before. Clarity. Not complete clarity. Not perfect clarity. But enough. Enough to recognize what they truly feel. Enough to stop pretending those feelings aren't real. Enough to begin moving toward honesty instead of away from it. And here's the most fascinating part of all. The gathering ended. The conversation ended. The friends went home. The room became empty. Yet the story did not end there. Because later that night, when everything was quiet, when nobody else was around, when there were no distractions left, your person found themselves replaying every word that had been spoken. Every question. Every answer. Every realization. And during that late-night reflection, one final understanding emerged. An understanding even more powerful than anything shared during the gathering itself. It wasn't about what their friends thought. It wasn't about what others noticed. It wasn't about outside opinions anymore. It became about what they knew. What they felt. What they could no longer deny. And the realization that arrived in that silent moment would begin shaping every choice that followed. Because sometimes the most important conversation isn't the one we have with others. It's the one we finally have with ourselves. And last night, your person finally had that conversation. What they discovered there may change everything that comes next. The most important part of the night happened after everyone else had already gone home. No audience. No friends. No questions. No conversations. Just silence. The kind of silence that seems ordinary until it begins revealing things you have been too busy to hear. Your person sat alone with their thoughts. The gathering was over. The voices were gone. Yet somehow the conversation kept continuing inside their mind. Every question returned. Every answer echoed. Every realization replayed itself. And for the first time in a long time, they stopped distracting themselves from what they truly felt. Have you ever experienced a moment when everything suddenly makes sense? Not because something new appeared, but because something that was always there finally became visible. That was the feeling. The truth was not arriving. The truth had already arrived long ago. Your person was simply seeing it clearly now. And clarity can be powerful. Sometimes powerful enough to change an entire direction. As the hours passed, memories began surfacing. Unexpected memories. Small moments. Tiny details. Conversations that seemed ordinary at the time. Little things most people would forget. Yet your person remembered them. Not because they were trying to. Because those memories carried meaning. One memory led to another. Then another. Then another. And suddenly they realized something that stopped them completely. You had become part of their emotional landscape. Part of their internal world. Part of the way they viewed tomorrow. That realization felt impossible to ignore. Stay with me. Because what happened next may be the most revealing moment of this entire story. Your person began asking themselves questions. Real questions. The kind people ask only when they are ready for honest answers. Why do thoughts of this person return so often? Why does their energy feel different? Why does imagining a future somehow feel more complete when they are included in it? Why does every attempt to move on from these feelings somehow lead back to the same place? Back to you. Back to the connection. Back to the possibility. And little by little, answers began appearing. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Quietly. Naturally. Almost like pieces of a puzzle finding where they belong. The answer wasn't obsession. The answer wasn't fantasy. The answer wasn't coincidence. The answer was significance. You had become significant to them. More significant than they originally realized. More significant than they admitted to friends. Even more significant than they admitted to themselves. And that discovery changed the emotional atmosphere of the entire night. What if this moment changes your entire path? What if some realizations arrive exactly when they are needed most? Those questions began floating through their thoughts. Because suddenly, the future felt less uncertain than before. Not fully clear. But clearer. And clarity creates movement. This is something many people never understand. Life rarely changes in one giant dramatic moment. Instead, it changes through a series of quiet realizations. One realization leads to another. One truth creates another truth. One honest moment opens the door for the next. And last night became one of those door-opening moments. Your person started understanding that feelings cannot remain hidden forever. Eventually they seek expression. Eventually they seek direction. Eventually they seek action. Not because someone forces them. Because that is their nature. And for the first time, your person stopped imagining what could go wrong. Instead, they started imagining what could go right. That shift matters. More than most people realize. Because the future often begins changing the moment our focus changes. When fear steps back, possibility steps forward. When doubt becomes quieter, vision becomes louder. When confusion fades, purpose starts emerging. And purpose was beginning to emerge last night. Before we continue, if this message is touching your heart, let me gently invite you to subscribe and become part of this growing journey. And if something here resonates deeply, share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes the words you leave may encourage someone else who needed to hear them today. Now listen carefully. Because something happened just before your person finally went to sleep. Something small. Yet unforgettable. They imagined a conversation. A future conversation. Not a perfect one. Not a rehearsed one. Just an honest conversation. And in that imagined moment, they weren't hiding anymore. They weren't avoiding their feelings. They weren't pretending everything was fine. They were simply being real. Completely real. And strangely enough, that imagined conversation brought them peace. Not anxiety. Not pressure. Peace. Because deep down, honesty always feels lighter than hiding. Truth always feels lighter than carrying uncertainty. And that feeling stayed with them. Even as the night grew later. Even as the room became darker. Even as the world around them fell asleep. The feeling remained. A quiet certainty. A growing awareness. An understanding that something meaningful is unfolding. Something they can no longer dismiss. Something they can no longer explain away. Something that continues growing stronger every time they acknowledge it. And here is where the story takes another unexpected turn. Because while your person was reaching these realizations, they had no idea that another shift was already beginning. A shift involving timing. A shift involving courage. A shift involving choices that will soon become impossible to postpone. The gathering may be over. The conversation may have ended. The night may have passed. But the consequences of those honest words are only beginning to reveal themselves. Because every truth creates momentum. Every realization creates movement. Every moment of clarity opens a path that did not exist before. And your person is now standing at the beginning of that path. A path that leads somewhere they once feared to explore. A path they are becoming increasingly curious to follow. A path connected to everything they finally admitted last night. And what happens when curiosity becomes intention? What happens when intention becomes courage? What happens when courage finally meets opportunity? That is the chapter that is about to unfold next. And it may become the most important chapter of all. Not every turning point announces itself with noise. Some arrive quietly. So quietly that most people don't recognize them until much later. And that is exactly where your person found themselves after that unforgettable night. The morning came. Sunlight filled the room. Life appeared normal. The world continued moving exactly as it always had. Yet something was different. Not around them. Inside them. The conversation with friends was over. The questions had been answered. The memories had been revisited. But the clarity remained. In fact, it seemed stronger than before. Almost as if the truth had finally found a permanent place within their heart. Have you ever noticed how certain realizations refuse to leave once they arrive? You can distract yourself. You can stay busy. You can focus on other things. Yet the understanding remains. Waiting. Growing. Becoming impossible to ignore. That was the experience your person was having. Throughout the day, ordinary moments carried unusual meaning. A simple thought reminded them of you. A passing memory brought a smile they didn't expect. A quiet pause during a busy moment somehow led their mind back to the same place. Back to you. Back to the connection. Back to the feelings they finally admitted existed. And for the first time, they weren't trying to stop those thoughts. That may sound simple. But it is actually profound. Because acceptance changes everything. The moment people stop fighting their feelings, they begin understanding them. And understanding creates direction. Stay here a little longer. Because another revelation is beginning to emerge. As the day continued, your person started noticing something surprising. Their future seemed different now. Not because circumstances had suddenly changed. Because perspective had changed. And perspective has incredible power. A path can look impossible one day and promising the next, even when the path itself remains exactly the same. The difference is vision. The difference is awareness. The difference is what we allow ourselves to believe. Your person had spent so much time focusing on uncertainty that they forgot something important. Possibilities exist too. Hope exists too. Positive outcomes exist too. And once that realization appeared, their mind began exploring new territory. Instead of asking, "What if nothing happens?" they started asking, "What if something beautiful is already unfolding?" Instead of focusing on obstacles, they began noticing opportunities. Instead of imagining distance, they started imagining connection. That shift was subtle, yet powerful. Because every future is shaped by the questions we repeatedly ask ourselves. And their questions were changing. Now pause and think about this. What if certain people enter our lives not to teach us about love alone, but to teach us about courage? What if they arrive to help us become more honest versions of ourselves? What if the connection itself is not only about another person, but about personal transformation? That realization was beginning to grow within your person. Because when they thought about you, they weren't only thinking about emotions anymore. They were thinking about growth. About possibility. About becoming someone capable of expressing what truly matters. And that is where the story becomes even more meaningful. You see, many people wait for perfect timing before they become honest. But perfect timing rarely arrives. Instead, honesty creates its own timing. Courage creates its own opportunity. And your person was slowly beginning to understand that truth. The fascinating part? The change wasn't happening because someone pressured them. Not because friends encouraged them. Not because circumstances demanded it. The change was happening naturally. From within. Like a seed finally deciding it is time to grow. Like dawn deciding it is time to become morning. Like a chapter quietly preparing to become a new story. And something tells me this is only the beginning. Because later that day, another thought crossed their mind. A thought that returned again and again. It was not complicated. It was not dramatic. Yet it carried enormous weight. They began wondering what you would say if you truly knew everything they felt. Not the surface emotions. Not the small hints. Everything. The real feelings. The honest feelings. The feelings they had finally spoken aloud the night before. That question stayed with them. Because for the first time, they were not imagining what they wanted to say. They were imagining what honesty might create. And that changes the energy completely. You'll understand everything at the end. Because what happened next revealed something even deeper. Your person began recognizing that fear had been making decisions for too long. Fear of uncertainty. Fear of rejection. Fear of misunderstanding. Fear of outcomes they could not control. Yet every meaningful dream requires moving beyond fear at some point. Every meaningful connection requires trust at some point. Every meaningful future requires courage at some point. And that understanding was becoming impossible to ignore. The remarkable thing is that courage does not appear all at once. It arrives in stages. First comes awareness. Then acceptance. then intention, then action. Your person has already crossed the first stages. Awareness arrived. Acceptance arrived. Intention is beginning to arrive. And when intention grows strong enough, action naturally follows. That is the direction this story is moving toward. Not because destiny forces it. Because truth naturally seeks expression. Because honesty naturally seeks a voice. Because genuine feelings naturally seek a path forward. And as evening approached once again, your person felt something they had not felt in a very long time. Not confusion. Not frustration. Not uncertainty. Hope. Quiet hope. Steady hope. The kind of hope that does not need to shout because it already knows where it is going. That hope stayed with them. It followed them through the evening. It remained during moments of reflection. It remained when the world became quiet again. And deep inside, they understood something that would have seemed impossible only days earlier. The conversation with friends was never the ending. It was the beginning. The beginning of honesty. The beginning of clarity. The beginning of courage. The beginning of a new chapter they are only now becoming ready to enter. And the next step waiting ahead is unlike anything they expected. Because very soon, your person will face a choice. A choice between remaining where they are, or moving toward what their heart has finally acknowledged. A choice between silence and truth. A choice between wondering and knowing. And when that moment arrives, everything they discovered that night will suddenly matter more than ever before. Because some conversations change an evening. But some conversations change a future. And your person is beginning to realize the difference.